Imagine that you work as a secretary for an executive for 9 long years, and when you decide to resign to focus on building a family, your boss realizes how much you're missed. So the man becomes determined to win you over and make you stay, whether it's romantically by becoming his partner or just a work colleague. Either way, he just wants you to work for him, and for that, he's even willing to marry you. Will the man's attempts to win you over make you stay in your job, or will it work and you'll become a couple? I'm Nina, and in today's recap we'll be watching What's Wrong with Secretary Kim. The story opens with Miso, better known as Secretary Kim, who everyone recognizes as such because she works for a vice president of a company. The man is very famous, successful, and handsome. We see Miso doing her job every day for 9 years, waking up at 5 a.m., preparing the vice president's clothes and accompanying him on all his tasks, in and out of the office, being a loyal right-hand man to her boss and, as a result, not having a personal life as successful as her work. Young Jun is known for being a very objective executive who doesn't give his employees second chances. The man also sometimes uses the method of humiliating and repressing, believing that this is the best way for a person to learn, but it was only Miso who made this way of the vice president a daily fuel for improvement. One evening, Secretary Kim decided to tell her boss, after an event, that he should find her another secretary, as she intended to leave the company soon. The conversation went very smoothly, Miso knowing how to bring up a subject that would be difficult to have in a very pleasant tone, and Young Jun just accepted it at first. However, as soon as he got home, the vice president couldn't sleep properly, and this subject would terrify him for a long time. The next day, the news has already spread around the company and CRA wants to apply to take Secretary Kim's place. She's an employee who works in the vice president's office and thinks she's one of the best people for the role. However, I don't think she has any idea that Miso works every day, and when I say every day, I mean weekends and the night shift too. Young Jun decides for the first time in a long time that he's not going to have lunch with his secretary Kim and goes to his friend President Park to talk about it and maybe get some advice on how to get Miso to stay with the company. Yusik believes that it's the 9-year crisis. The man talks about the crises in a relationship, which are 3, 6, and 9 years. However, this theory applies to married couples, but he thinks there could be an exception and he could fit into this situation, since his wife spends most of her time with the vice president. President Park experienced the crises with his ex-wife, and when it reached 9 years, they ended up separating. Young Jun understood what his friend was trying to tell him and is looking for a solution if this is the problem. The vice president calls her to go to his house for lunch, and when they arrive, Young Jun tells her that he doesn't give second chances, but that he'll make an exception for her. The man offers Miso the position of director, says he'll buy her a house with his personal money, that he'll pay off the debts in her family, and before Secretary Kim can say anything, the man's parents interrupt them and call them to lunch. Later, when Miso is alone with his mother, the woman says that she would like her son to meet someone like Secretary Kim. She even wants it to be herself, and this makes Miso feel a little embarrassed. As they leave, Secretary Kim tells Young Jun that she still wants to leave the company, even after the great offer she received, and the vice president can't believe it. He was convinced that this would make her stay. In the next scene we see Miso with her sisters. The woman has helped a lot with their studies, and it seems that Miso is always solving her family's problems, like the girl's father who owed money to loan sharks. To solve this case, Secretary Kim sold her car, which she had won from the vice president for being 10 minutes late for the bus, and paid off the debt. Miso has a pollen allergy, and it's a really bad one, where you sneeze all the time and your eyes water. With this information, we move on to the next scene, where Young Jun once again goes to President Park to talk, since the solution he had found didn't solve his problem. Yusik thinks that his secretary, Kim, might be taking a liking to his friend and, for the vice president, this might make sense. He starts to think that Miso was upset the night she resigned because she had to buy flowers for the man to give to another woman. However, as we learned earlier, Secretary Kim's eyes were teary because of her allergy. Miso tells her sisters that she has the feeling that if she doesn't leave the company right now, she thinks she'll stay there forever. Their conversation is interrupted when Secretary Kim receives a call from the vice president asking her to come to the company. As she's getting ready to leave, the woman comes across a spider and starts to have a panic attack. Miso has a phobia of spiders. As soon as she arrives at the appointed place, Secretary Kim gets into the car in which Young Jun is waiting for her, and inside the vehicle her pollen allergy kicks in, as the vice president presents her with a bouquet of flowers. The man gives Miso half a day off to rest and discovers that her biggest motivation for leaving the company is to find her own life. When asked what that means, the woman replies that she doesn't want to be anyone's secretary or a member of anyone's family, just Miso's life. This keeps Young Jun awake at night. The man doesn't understand how she can say that the time they spent together wasn't part of her life. The next day, Miso is able to sleep a little more, and when she goes to the company to interview a candidate to take her place, the vice president and she start arguing indirectly, throwing things like, "You have to know that when you come in, you'll let your identity be erased and you'll simply become a secretary," into the air. In the end, Young Jun decided to hire the woman and asked Miso to make her a copy of himself. Before leaving, the man asked her what it meant to find her own life, and Secretary Kim explained that for the past 9 years she's just been working tirelessly and now she just wants to find some time for herself. Then she intends to find someone, date and get married, bearing in mind that she's already 29. In the evening at her home, Miso prepared an instruction manual for her new secretary and added a message for her to remember to take time for herself. Later, the vice president shows up at her house and asks her to marry him, so that she can get married the way she wants to and continue doing her job the way he wants her to. Miso refuses the proposal, and Young Jun believes that she may have had this reaction because she was expecting something more elaborate, so the man sets to work on it. The next day, Secretary Kim starts training the woman who will replace her. Her name is Ga. Miso explains to her all the schedules that the woman will have to memorize, and that it is of the utmost importance that she records that the vice president must not have cable ties near him. Secretary Kim is dismissed early that day because the vice president has no other commitments, so he goes to have his meal with President Park. And the man advises his friend on the decision he's made to ask his wife to marry him, saying that it's like when you want to buy a company, you have to conquer it. And the first step is to start dating, not jumping straight into marriage. In the evening, Miso meets the office staff at a restaurant to drink and celebrate Ga joining the company. It's not such a formal dinner, since the vice president isn't there. But not for long, as the man soon surprises everyone by turning up. Of course, it's not an establishment at the level Young Jun is used to, since when he orders a whiskey he discovers that only soju and beer are served in the place, but the man makes an effort to be there. Afterwards, the group goes to a cheap karaoke bar nearby, but that's too much for the vice president and he reserves the whole place for them to sing and have fun. Young Jun has started to make an effort to be more attentive and win Miso's heart, so he gets her some food and serves her drinks. During the singing, Sarah drank a lot and got a bit carried away, which led her to make a fool of herself in front of everyone. But even worse, it involved her boss. The woman couldn't control the envy she was feeling towards her new secretary, so she stood up and grabbed the microphone from her hand, then started mocking the way she was singing and saying things like, "What's missing for you to want me as your vice president's secretary, since I'm better than Miso and Ga." To finish on a high note, when the men tried to get her to calm down, Sarah ended up letting go and falling into Young Jun's lap. That was the end of the team dinner, and the vice president took his secretary Kim home. Before Miso entered the house, he asked her if she had noticed how attentive the man had been today and that now Young Jun would do it every day. He would even let Secretary Kim date him. However, the woman refuses and says something the vice president thought he would never hear, that he's not her type. After entering the house, the man is still outside and starts texting her. Young Jun says she doesn't understand how there isn't something about him that makes her dislike him, given that the man is handsome, rich and so on. Miso is amazed at how narcissistic he can be, and at the same time as she receives messages from her boss, her sister sends her some asking her to send hearts from a game so that the woman can continue playing. Secretary Kim ends up expressing her feelings about how hard it was to serve him 24 hours a day, and the man says that he only gave her all this responsibility because Miso never denied him anything. The woman then says that she just wants an ordinary romance with an ordinary person and asks him if it wouldn't be impossible for him to live a romance, since he only admires himself. The messages that his sister sends come in the middle of the conversation, and Miso sends the hearts to stop her, but it turns out that they have been sent to the vice president. The next day at work, the man changes his attitude towards his secretary Kim and picks on her for every little mistake GA makes, since she's the one training the woman. And we see that when Young-jun calls the replacement secretary into his office, he tells her to pretend she's being trained to replace Miso. In the next scene, Secretary Kim is having dinner with some friends, and one of them comments that a friend of her husband's is interested after seeing a photo of Miso on social media, so her friend is in charge of arranging a blind date. They then receive a questionnaire, and if they agree to answer it, they will win a dish from the restaurant. We later see that only they received the questionnaire, because Young-jun is involved in it. The questions were about what they would like their first date with a man to be like, what they would like to do, what they would like to get as a present, and so on. The next day, the answers come in the form of events. President Park asks Miso to meet him at an amusement park, and when the woman arrives at the place, there is no one there but her, but suddenly the lights come on and the place seems to come alive. Whose Secretary Kim ends up meeting there is Young-jun, and the two of them spend the night having fun on the rides. The part that Miso liked the most was the carousel, because when she was little she was never allowed to go on it because her parents didn't have enough money for their 3 daughters, so it was always the other 2 who went. The vice president ended up talking a bit about his older brother. When he was in 4th grade, Young-jun was the youngest in the class, because they moved him up a class because he was so smart, and that made the other kids want to beat him up. And according to the man, the worst with him was his older brother, who was also in the same class. Then the two of them went on a boat, and in the middle of the trip, the vice principal arranged for there to be a fireworks display, and Miso loved it. The man even became more humanized by taking off his coat and giving it to the woman. However, the charm wore off at the end of the night when Miso realized that he had only followed what she had written on the questionnaire, and despite his good intentions, it wasn't genuine. All the things that Secretary Kim had written down were fulfilled, only one of which was missing, which was to say goodbye to the person you've been on a date with a kiss on their doorstep, like a scene from a movie. Apparently, Young-jun was willing to do this, but Miso put the huge stuffed cow she had won in the middle of them and went home. It's only the next day that Secretary Kim notices that inside the little cow's purse there's a present with a beautiful necklace that the man bought for her. Miso puts it around her neck, and Young-jun admires her with the jewel throughout the day, but without her noticing. Today the blind date that her friend had set up for her will take place, and when the substitute secretary lets slip to the vice principal that the woman will be going on a date, the man goes to President Park to talk. Young-jun is perplexed as to how Secretary Kim had the nerve to wear the necklace he bought for her with another man, but at the same time the deputy director tries to reassure himself that the date he prepared for her was incredible, and that it won't live up to expectations. And that's more or less what happens. The man's manner makes her feel embarrassed, and the place he's chosen for the two of them to have dinner is too noisy and cramped. But sometimes a photo taken at the right moment can make things seem more than they really are, and this happens to Miso. When the man is cleaning something around his neck, a company employee takes a photo because she recognizes Secretary Kim and sends it to everyone in her department. The picture ends up reaching President Park, who shows it to Young-jun, causing the man to lose the confidence he had in his plan. Returning to the meeting, Miso asks the man to do some research into a case of children who went missing for a period in the 1990s, and he promises that he will do everything he can to find something. The meeting was really disastrous, but at the end of it, the man expresses his feelings of wanting to meet her again one day, and when he goes to reply, the woman notices that his tie is crooked, so out of habit, Secretary Kim ends up fixing it. At this point Young-jun arrives at the place and doesn't like the scene in front of him, so he hurries to end the meeting and acts like a jealous person. The next day, the vice president has a panic attack inside the company. The new secretary has put cable ties to organize the man's computer wires and hasn't remembered the advice she received on the first day. Secretary Kim didn't say it was the newcomer and took responsibility for the mistake, but as they left the room, she reminded the woman that she shouldn't use the object in any way around Young Jun and had to have an even more serious conversation when she asked if the man hadn't overreacted. In the end, Miso says that it will be okay if GA lends her the book he got before the launch from his favorite writer. Things calm down and the company's athletic competition begins. Secretary Kim wins every category she's entered in, and once again the vice president is jealous to see her with her body attached to another man, no matter how necessary it is for the activity. When Young Jun gets up, he hurts his ankle, and now there's a little gossip between us. It's not clear whether he really hurt it or did it to get Miso's attention, but either way it works, so the two of them go to his house before the end of the competitions to put ice on the injured part. At the house, the man doesn't want to take off his sock to apply the ice pack, but Secretary Kim still tries to take it off and ends up seeing that the man has a very deep scar. Young Jun quickly covers her up again and changes the subject to lighten the mood. The man comments on how close she came to her partner, whom she didn't even know, in the race, even though it was necessary for them to win, and the woman says that he couldn't complain, since he said he would only accept first place. Then, since Miso wasn't bothered by having someone so close to her, the vice president starts to get closer and closer and accidentally pulls her towards him. Secretary Kim gets off the vice president's back when she hears the compress bag fall to the floor. When she returns to the room with more ice in it, she realizes that the man has fallen asleep. Young Jun has a nightmare in which a woman in red heels is calling him and he wakes up terrified. So the man asks Miso if she could sleep in the guest room like she did the other times, because he doesn't want to be alone tonight. However, the vice president soon drops the offer, after receiving a call from his brother telling him that he wants to see him. When Miso leaves Young Jun's residence and goes to his house, she bumps into his brother, not knowing who he is. The man found the woman beautiful right away. In the next scene we see the brothers talking. Sung-yeon says that he has decided to make this contact with the youngest because he has decided to forgive him for something that happened in their childhood, and we see that the vice president doesn't like his words very much, so he asks the man to leave and walks out of the room. The next day there's a lot of work to be done at the company. A group that competes in the market with the vice president's business is also preparing to open an art center and has decided to move up the opening to get more visibility than Young Jun's business. So in order not to be left behind, the vice president also postpones the opening of his art center, and now his employees will have to work hard to get everything ready for the opening. At the library, a small problem occurs while the man and his secretary Kim are visiting. The energy in the place goes down, and to pass the time, Miso chooses a novel, which she says is her favorite, to read. Young Jun ends up enjoying their time together in the library and doesn't even mind the blackout. Later, we see the man at her house and he's even picked up that book she said she liked to read. Secretary Kim is busy for the next few days thinking of a writer who could put on a big event to draw attention to the library they are going to open, and Miso thinks of Morpheus, a writer whose identity has not yet been revealed. So the woman writes an email to the writer and waits for his reply. Young Jun's brother decides that he's going to visit him in his office, and so that the man doesn't meet Miso, the vice president asks her to take the stairs through the building and go to a snack bar to buy a bunch of things. However, Young Jun didn't expect that the woman and her brother would accidentally bump into each other in the reception area, and at the very moment they do, they remember that they had bumped into each other before. Sung-yeon asks for Kim's secretary's number so that they can keep in touch, but the woman gives her a false contact and rushes off to the office with all those purchases. Miso even jokes to herself while waiting for the elevator, that if that man were Morpheus, the writer of the moment who writes about novels, she would even pass on his number, and little does she know that Sung-yeon, it's really him. Young Jun's mother invites her secretary Kim to meet her. The woman presents Miso with a gift and reveals that her aim was to find out if her son was in a good mood so that he could be invited to a family dinner at her house. Secretary Kim believes that the man has no reason to refuse, but when his mother asks him, Young Jun says straight away that he'll be busy. So the man's mother finds another way to get him to come to her house. The woman purposely forgets her purse on Miso's desk and says that she only wants her son to take her there in the evening. Young Jun ends up doing what his mother wanted, and after dinner, his older brother comes to talk to him. The man talks as if he wants to meet Secretary Kim, since their mother spoke so highly of her at dinner. However, the vice president keeps his mouth shut, and Sung-yeon insinuates that because the youngest doesn't say anything, he's afraid that the eldest will end up dating Miso. The two end up arguing about something that happened between them a long time ago, and in the end, Young Jun says that he doesn't hate his older brother, but that he despises him. Sung-yeon stands up and retorts that if it weren't for what the younger brother did at the time, he would be the one in the position of vice president. And Young Jun replies that his brother is weak and prefers to hurt people in order to get ahead, that even if that accident hadn't happened, Sung-yeon would never have reached his position. Sung-yeon ends up going berserk and punching the younger brother in the face, but then their parents arrive and beg them to stop. Then the older brother goes home, and while he's thinking about the things that have happened during the day, his cell phone starts ringing. It's his assistant telling him that there's an email with a very interesting proposal. As soon as the man goes to check it, he comes across the message that Miso had sent him, and now, I don't know if out of a tantrum or wanting to prove something to Young Jun, he agrees to work on the opening project as Morpheus. Meanwhile, Young Jun ended up going to his secretary Kim's house, and before he entered the apartment, she asked him to wait outside for a minute so she could tidy him up. In desperation, Miso ended up putting his clothes, which were on the chair, under the little cow he had won from the vice president. His secretary, Kim, takes care of the cut on his mouth, even though she doesn't know what caused it. To cheer him up, she invites him to eat some ramen that she has made. While he's cooking, the man keeps watching the things in Miso's room, and when the woman realizes that he's going to touch the little cow, she runs to stop him from seeing her clothes underneath, but ends up falling on top of him on the bed. Secretary Kim quickly starts to leave, and something unexpected happens. The man hugs her and tells her that he'd like to stay like this for a while and that he really wants to love her. Just as Miso starts to believe the man's words, he breaks the mood and says that this is the kind of thing that children's novel she likes says. Secretary Kim rushes into the kitchen to finish dinner, and although it's not what Young Jun is used to eating, he ends up enjoying it a lot. Soon after leaving Miso's house, the vice president goes to talk to President Park about what has just happened between him and his wife. And his friend says that when you're invited to eat ramen, it means that this meeting has a great significance, like someone telling the other person that they like them, indirectly. In fact, Young Jun ultimately lies to Yusik that this situation isn't about him and his secretary Kim, but about a cousin close to him who was having second thoughts. The next day, the vice president did something that had never happened in the 9 years they'd been together. He went to Miso's house to pick her up so they could go to work together. In the car, he surprised her once again. Young Jun bought coffee and something to eat so that his secretary Kim would be well fed for work. The man spent the whole day acting like a knight, something that didn't happen often. Meanwhile, the men's father goes to talk to the older man who started the fight. He wants to know when his son will apologize to Young Jun, because their mother is so upset by the situation that she can't sleep. The man also says that he shouldn't bother the youngest anymore, because Young Jun already has a lot on his plate with the company's projects, so if he gets upset, it will rub off on his employees too. In the next scene we see that Secretary Kim is called to reception because she has a visitor waiting, Sung-yeon. As soon as she arrives, the woman asks him how he knows her name and department, because she doesn't realize that the man is Morpheus. Miso just connects him to the memories of the times they crossed paths. However, Sung-yeon explains why she was there and that she was the one who called him. Embarrassed, Secretary Kim apologizes and the two go to an establishment to talk more while they eat. And Young Jun has lunch with President Park. The two talk about that supposed cousin of the vice president's, and his friend explains that the man should confess right away to the woman he likes, because they don't like being kept in the dark for too long. And after Miso and the writer meet, she gives him her real number this time. ashamed of what she did last time. At the company, the vice president is thinking about what his friend said and he doesn't know how to act like an ordinary man, since Miso once told him that this was her preference, so Young-jun asks his employees about restaurants that ordinary people would like to go to and in the end none of them can help him. The vice president had to surrender to searching the internet and when he finds the perfect restaurant, he invites her to meet him there at 8 p.m. Miso is excited for the dinner, until she ends up being affected by the comments made throughout the day about her always wearing the same clothes, so she decides to go to a store to buy a beautiful dress to wear in the evening. When she's on her way to the meeting, Sung-yeon calls his secretary Kim to tell her that he's already got her answer about whether or not to take part in the project, but that he wants to tell her in person. Although Miso told him she couldn't make it today because she already had an appointment, he insists on seeing her for 10 minutes and the woman ends up agreeing to meet him outside the restaurant where she made an appointment with the vice president. When he arrives, the two have a quick chat in which the writer tells him that he has agreed to take part in the inauguration and when the man goes to hand him his book, which has not yet been released, the vice president appears. The man looks furious. Young-jun takes Miso's hand and leads her inside. The two of them argue in the establishment. The vice president says he doesn't want Morpheus involved and if he's already said no, she should just obey. Secretary Kim is surprised by the sudden change in the treatment she's receiving from Young-jun and says that if it wasn't something important he wanted to say at dinner, she asks to leave and the man allows it. The vice president leaves the venue and goes straight to his older brother's house. As they talk, Sung-yeon says that she can see on the younger man's face that he's afraid that his secretary Kim will be stolen from him and, apparently, so will the company. However, Young-jun tells him that the man can take part in the inauguration and if he thought he had any influence over the group or Miso, he overestimated himself. The next day at work, Secretary Kim learns from the others that the vice president has ordered marketing to publicize the fact that Morpheus will be attending the inauguration. The woman is confused, because the last time she had seen the man, he had refused to get involved with the writer. So Miso goes to her boss's office and asks him never to cross the line again, or to make her rethink that he might be interested in her. After a while, Secretary Kim learns about another piece of information involving the vice president and the writer Morpheus. One of her co-workers tells her that the two are brothers and now the woman begins to understand a little of her boss's anger the day before. For once Young-jun had let slip that he wasn't a big fan of his older brother and some of the things the man had done to him throughout his life. Later, the two end up making up and Miso even goes to work in the vice president's office at night. At one point Young-jun gets up from his chair and comments on what she had said earlier, adding that he wants to make her think again. The man slowly approaches Secretary Kim and she even closes her eyes and pouts to receive a kiss. Just when we think it's finally going to happen, the man's mind flashes to the woman in the red heels and he pushes Kim's desk chair away in a huff, causing the woman to run to the other side of the room. Of course, Miso is embarrassed and says she'll go home and take the next day off. When she's home, Young-jun writes her a message apologizing for what happened and his secretary Kim plays along, saying that nothing happened between them. The next day, the woman is bored, doesn't know what to do and remembers having asked that reporter she went on a blind date with to do some research on kidnappings that took place in the 90s, so the woman texts him to see if he's found anything. Later, Miso bumps into Young-jun and he tells her that he's decided to take a day off and that he'll do whatever his secretary Kim wants. Miso takes the opportunity to take him to embarrassing places and puts him through some experiences he's never had to deal with, like riding on a crowded bus. Meanwhile, GA is looking for an apartment to rent that's closer to her work, so she won't be late anymore and the realtor explains that the woman can use the roof if she wants. There's a man who raises tomatoes and other things up there. The realtor adds that he's a bit of a cheapskate and even tells a piece of gossip that even though the rent is already cheap, he begged them to lower it a little more. When GA goes up to the roof to meet the man, she comes across GWI Nam, who works in his company and is known for having a lot of money and being very dedicated to his work. The woman promises that she won't tell anyone at work about her condition, but even so, GWI Nam keeps an eye on her for the next few days to make sure she doesn't let anything slip. Returning to Miso, she and the man have a very pleasant day, and at the end of it, they both spend some time trying to catch a stuffed animal in those machines with a claw. After several attempts, Young Jun is willing to buy the machine, but his secretary Kim explains that the fun is in catching them like an ordinary person. The next day, Miso receives a call from the reporter. The man has found something about a kidnapping involving one of the Lee brothers. Unfortunately, he can't tell exactly which of the two it is, as he only got the information that the child was in the 4th grade, but the two brothers did the school year together. Secretary Kim goes to work thinking about what she's just discovered, and on the way, President Park passes her and offers her a lift home. Being a close friend of the vice president, Miso asks him if he knows anything about the affair of one of the brothers, but Yusik says that over the years of friendship, Young Jun has never said anything about it. The man asks her why she's looking for this case, and Secretary Kim says that she has some memories of when she was little. She's locked in an empty house for a day or so and there's a boy near her. Miso believes that this boy is the vice president because of his phobia of hugging and the scar on his heel. President Park says that she could ask the vice president directly, but the woman believes that there must be a reason why he hasn't said anything before. The secretary, Kim, spends all day at work treating Young Jun differently, as if apologizing for not having recognized him before. In the next scene we see the vice president heading off to an important lunch. On the way he spots that teddy bear catching machine and decides to try it until he succeeds. When Young Jun returns to the company, he gives his secretary Kim what he took for her, and the woman's eyes fill with tears. Later, Jie tells Miso that she found out that Morphew was kidnapped when he was little, because they discovered a text he had written on an anonymous blog, venting about it. Secretary Kim asks her to read it, and as she looks through the letters, memories of the place come flooding back into her mind. When Young Jun comes out of his office, he notices Miso's surprised face and she decides to ask him about what happened, whether it was really his brother who was caught, not himself, and the vice president confirms that it was Sung-yeon. Secretary Kim decides to ask him about the scar on his ankle, and Young Jun says that he got it when he was young. After their conversation, Miso ends up bumping into Sung-yeon, who has gone to the company to sign a contract, and he takes the opportunity to apologize to Secretary Kim for not telling her earlier about being the vice president's brother. The two of them end up having a coffee together to talk about the time they spent together locked up in that empty house. Sung-yeon doesn't remember many things. Sometimes when you experience a big trauma like that, you can end up losing your memory of what happened. The man remembers that his brother jumped into the same class as him and stole his friends for himself. The boys made fun of him, according to Sung-yeon, and one day his younger brother took him somewhere and abandoned him, at which point the boy was kidnapped. Later, Miso goes to Young Jun's house to organize the books in his library. In the middle of her work, the woman finds a folder with several CVs of secretaries better prepared than her to work with the vice president. Secretary Kim begins to wonder why she was chosen out of so many better options, and Young Jun replies that it was simply because she was Miso. The woman then asks if he had met her before, and the man replies that it would be impossible. Secretary Kim always found it strange when she started at the company and her superior told her to apply for the job. At first she thought she wouldn't be selected and was surprised when she found out that she was. This doubt has always been in the back of her mind, the reason she was chosen, and in the midst of a situation where she still thinks Young Jun is the little boy she protected when she was caught, despite being told otherwise, Miso becomes even more confused. Should she believe in reason or her intuition? Later, when she is saying goodbye, the vice president asks her if the conversation she had with her brother was as good and enlightening as she had hoped. Secretary Kim says yes, and when Young Jong brings up the subject of them saying that all this happened because he left Sung-yeon behind, even though he doesn't remember anything, Miso replies that it's okay, they were children, and that if he doesn't remember, it's for the best. The woman confessed that she still hasn't come to terms with the fact that Sung-yeon was that little boy, and it's a bit strange for her. Secretary Kim left and we see that Young Jun didn't actually tell her the truth. since when we go back in time, it was the man who asked her superior to send her to apply for a secretary position, and when he introduced himself to the woman the first time, he already knew who she was. The next day, Miso goes to talk to President Park about what she discovered, that it wasn't the vice president who was caught as a child, but his older brother. The man comments that Secretary Kim seems to be disappointed by this information, but she tries to explain to him that it's nothing like that and that she would like the matter to remain between the two of them. In the course of the morning, Miso received a call inviting her to lunch, and before accepting, she warned the vice president about it, so that he wouldn't wait for her to eat, and said that GA would accompany him to the meeting, so that she could get used to the demand. At lunch, Sung-yeon asked her what she wanted to do when she met him, and Secretary Kim explained that she didn't have anything in mind, she just wanted to find him, she didn't intend to date and marry him, as the man is thinking. Despite this, the little boy who got stuck with her is still her first love, but after many years, it doesn't mean that they're going to get involved. As the meeting is winding down, the two bump into the vice president outside the establishment. The man asks to speak to his brother alone, so Miso leaves. And their conversation is nothing but teasing about who will get the woman in the end. Meanwhile, in the car, Young-jun learns that later Secretary Kim will meet up with his older brother again, and the two of them will go to the approximate location of the kidnapping. The man asks the woman not to go, as there are things that could hurt her when she remembers, but she insists that she wants to find out certain things, regardless of what it will do to her. And we see that GA still has to deal with GWI Nam. The man is making sure that she doesn't open her mouth about his financial situation, and so he's going to a workshop where the head office staff are going, which isn't nice, as the man makes her tense with all this observation. Returning to Miso, she meets up with Sung-yeon after work, and the man picks her up in his vehicle. The vice president ended up canceling his appointments and inviting President Park to accompany him and listen to him vent. On the way there, we see that his friend is great at protecting his feelings, because when he sees Sung-yeon talking to Secretary Kim outside the car, he closes Young-jun's eyes so that he doesn't see and get angry. Meanwhile, when they are in the area similar to the one where the crime took place, Miso talks about the few things she remembers, like when the little boy took her hand when they ran away and led her to her house. Secretary Kim called this little boy Appa, which is the way they refer in Korea to an older brother, or an older friend who is very close, and in romantic relationships, it can be used to refer to your boyfriend. Sung-yeon asks her to start calling him that, so that she can help him remember more about those terrible days. In the next scene we see the president with Yoo-sik. The man tells him that he needs to work up the courage and declare himself to Miso so that he doesn't lose her to his older brother, and the two of them stop flirting. President Park also reveals that he knew Young-jun was using the excuse that he was his cousin to ask for advice. Returning to Miso, she hands Sung-yeon a diary she made for the little boy when she was little, telling him about her day-to-day life and some memories of what happened when they were caught. The man says some things that may sound a little strange, like being grateful to Young-jun for abandoning him and him being kidnapped because of it, because in the end he met the woman. Her feeling about it doesn't seem to be that. In my opinion as a viewer, he's romanticizing a trauma too much, so much so that his secretary Kim is a little surprised to hear these words. But no more so than Young-jun when Sung-yeon takes her to meet the vice president, and as they say goodbye, she uses the word Appa. Young-jun and Miso start a conversation in an establishment, which sounds a bit like an argument. The man tells her that she should bury the memories she's struggling to remember, so that she doesn't live in the past. And he says that this upsets the man she's flirting with, in this case him. Young-jun left his secretary Kim speechless, and when he went to say goodbye to her, he said that before he had proposed that the woman marry him, because he didn't want her to quit, but now the man really likes her and wants to build something. However, Miso says she doesn't think now is the best time to start a relationship and dismisses him. The next day, the office group gets together to go in a vehicle to the workshop. GWI Nam was the one who lost out on this trip, as Sara tried to please him by feeding him and ended up spilling sauce on the only suit the man has. And Miso ended up discovering with her colleagues that inviting someone to eat ramen is a way of indirectly letting them know that you want to seduce them, so Secretary Kim starts to feel ashamed, remembering the time she called the vice president to eat the dish. Later, the group decides they're going to have fun and Miso tells them that they should do just that, because the program was just something to deliver to the company. In fact, they're there to have fun. However, when they leave the house, they find Young-jun on the premises, which comes as a surprise to everyone, including Secretary Kim, and unfortunately now everyone will have to work, following what was in the program. At one point, the vice president reveals to Miso that the real reason he's there is so that at the end of the workshop the two of them can stop flirting and become boyfriend and girlfriend. In the next scene, we see that the group ends up doing a tape hunt made up of couples. Of course the vice president got Secretary Kim and then they split up, the winner getting a tablet that Young-jun added to the prize and a gift card. GWI Nam is the one who is most determined to win, not that he needs the device that much, but selling it guarantees him a good amount of money that he wasn't expecting, but his double GA doesn't understand how important it is to him. Meanwhile, Miso received a call from Sung-yeon while she was with the vice president, so Young-jun decided to pick up the cell phone and reply that Secretary Kim is busy at the moment. The vice president has decided that he will deal with what is to come with his beloved's curiosity about the past and that he will get over it so that the two of them can be together as a couple. So the first thing the woman wants to know is why he pushed her away when they were about to kiss, and the man is honest. He says that when he closes his eyes, from time to time Young-jun sees the ghost of a woman wanting to grab him and that scares him. However, as his secretary Kim was starting to get worried and asked if there had been any trauma in his life, the vice president made a joke about seeing a ghost at that moment to lighten the mood. As soon as the two of them get back to the house, everyone in the group is already at the table having dinner, and when they go to make more meat for them, the food has run out, so all that's left to eat is ramen, and although Miso is very much in the mood for a barbecue, he has to make do with the noodles. The next day, Young-jun leaves the workshop to close with a big brand in the company, and instead of taking his secretary Kim with him, he tells her to enjoy the place with the rest of the group and rest. However, if she wants to go to his house later, there will be a present waiting for her, and Miso confirms that she will go. In the next scene we see that the man is planning to have a barbecue in his garden to satisfy his lover's cravings and invites President Park to join him at the market, but at the end of the shopping, Young-jun dismisses his friend, who thought he was going to take part in the barbecue, and gets a bit upset about it. Later, Miso arrives at the vice president's house and loves the surprise, but they end up having to eat pizza in the end, as it was Young-jun's first time looking after meat and he ended up letting them all burn. At one point, the man goes to wipe his beloved's face, and when they get close, it looks like a kiss is about to happen. But unfortunately, when he closes his eyes, Young-jun remembers that woman and can't go any further. The situation becomes increasingly complicated when President Park shows up and catches them in that situation. Embarrassed, Secretary Kim says goodbye and rushes off. The next day, Miso ends up taking the elevator with Yusik, and she tries to explain to him that nothing is going on between her and the vice president. Changing the subject, the woman asks if President Park has noticed that Young-jun has a scar on one of his ankles, and Yusik replies that the man actually has one on both of them, because when they were younger and getting ready in the locker room, he noticed it. President Park comments that the way they are, it's like he's been tied up or something, and explains that when you tighten them too much with a rope or something, there's a low concentration of blood there which can leave marks in the future. The man even thought, when his secretary Kim commented on the kidnapping, that Young-jun might have been one of the children, but as soon as the woman told him about his older brother, Yusik dismissed the possibility. We cut to a scene where we see Sara paying for a little gaffe at the office. President Park's secretary has brought some macarons to the main office, and as the woman wasn't there, she left 3 on her desk. As soon as Sara arrives, she asks her colleagues who left her that treat, and one of them says that it was someone who really likes her. The woman immediately guesses that it's the vice president's driver and secretary, Mr. Young, so she sends him a message thanking him and saying that she'll appreciate them. A little time goes by and Sarah finds out that she was Yusuk's secretary, so she's ashamed of what she sent to the man. GA also has to deal with something. She and GWI Nam won the ribbon race, so the woman goes to him to hand over the prizes, and the man is unpleasant as usual, saying that she's being unfair to win one, because he was the one who found 2 of the 3 ribbons, so he deserved more. GWI Nam also says that when she orders food at home, to take half of it back to him, so it won't be a waste. In the next scene, Sung-yeon tells his mother about finding out that Miso was with him during his childhood trauma, and the woman is surprised, because when they were called to the police station, the boy was alone. So Madam Choi decided to call her secretary Kim and ask her to come to her house. There, the woman asks Miso to tell her in detail what she remembers, and Secretary Kim tells her a little about the place and how a boy who was there before her, a little older than her, comforted her when she was afraid. Madam Choi asks if he didn't feel cold in that place, because the boy, who is now a man, is very sensitive to the cold. The woman tells her that her son was wearing a cardigan made especially for the boy by his designer friend, and that he was the only one to have received something like this, apart from the designer's own children. Miso asks her how Young Jun came to lose his childhood memories and discovers that this happened during the period when the crime took place. The boy was drinking coffee one day and simply fainted. As soon as he woke up, he said he couldn't remember anything else. Then Sung-yeon appears and says that he will accompany her to the exit, only to change first, and the woman notices that there are no scars on his ankles like there were on his brother's. Outside, Sung-yeon says that he can't wait for winter to arrive, as he loves the cold, and this is another thing that Secretary Kim finds strange, as his mother has just said that her son, who was caught, was sensitive to the cold. Miso's mind is getting more and more confused and pointing out that Young Jun was the child with her in that horrible place, but the man denied it every time she asked. Speaking of the vice president, the two ran into each other at his parents' house, and the man went to pick her up, but his secretary Kim had already left. Young Jun ended up finding the diary she had given to his older brother, and with that, some memories started to come back to him. Later, the vice president went to Miso's house. He wanted to see her and also deliver a box full of caramel candies, to make up for the fact that earlier the man had eaten her last one. The next day, the inauguration of Young Jun's company's arts center and the lecture in which his brother will reveal himself as the writer Morpheus arrive. While the lecture is taking place, Miso notices the vice president enter the auditorium, and when she gets up to meet him, Sung-yeon, who was being interviewed, says that he has recently found his true love again and that he will dedicate himself to protecting her, just as he did when he was little and they went through a difficult time together. After receiving this declaration of love, Miso goes after the vice president, who left the premises after hearing his older brother's words. Secretary Kim tells Young Jun that the things Sung-yeon said and when he saw the man holding her hand earlier were all a misunderstanding, and she wants to make things clear so that the vice president doesn't misunderstand and end up walking away. Then Miso reveals that she likes him, so the man pulls her into a hug and then is about to give her a kiss, when he remembers that woman again, but this time Secretary Kim isn't going home in the mood and she approaches him to give him a kiss, thus breaking the trauma of Young Jun, who won't stop kissing his girlfriend. Afterwards, Young Jun takes Miso home and proposes to her again, but now he adds that she should accept as soon as possible. The next day, something happened that had never happened before. The vice president was so relaxed that things were working out between him and his secretary Kim, that he ended up falling asleep in a meeting. In taking advantage of this, President Park called her in to see something funny. Despite being asleep, the man answers everything that is asked anyway. Over the course of the day, Young Jun realizes that he doesn't feel comfortable dating Miso now, that she does the same things as before, such as pouring his water, preparing his snacks and so on, so he asks her not to become a bad boyfriend, that she doesn't do anything other than her real work duties as a secretary. Today wasn't a good day for our dear President Park, as he was on his way to a meeting when he saw his ex-wife on the street smiling with another man, and this shook Yusik, who still has feelings for her. Near the end of the workday, Miso asks the vice president not to give her any more special treatment, because being in front of him, always making him comfortable with everything, was her job for 9 years, and asking him to stop now doesn't make the woman feel good. The conversation between them ends up leaving their relationship a little shaken. It was the first couple's quarrel between the two. Meanwhile, Ji ended up receiving some tomatoes as a gift from her neighbor Gwi Nam, as an apology for the man having taken her fan earlier, thinking that someone had thrown it away. So the woman decided to be a good neighbor too and sent him half of the food she had ordered to eat, but as soon as she handed it over to Gwi Nam, she regretted it, because right away the man complained about the flavors she had ordered and told her his preferences for next time. Returning to our beautiful couple, in the evening the vice president goes to Miso's house, with food from the restaurant she's used to going to with her sisters, and Secretary Kim thanks him for coming to her home. The two end up making up. However, a problem arises when Miso's sisters show up and the woman ends up hiding her boyfriend in the closet so that they don't see him. Unfortunately, this is how the man ended up hearing the bad things his girlfriend said about him while they weren't yet in a relationship, because Secretary Kim said that the vice president was there, which is why there were 2 plates on the table, so the two of them opened the list of things the man has wrong with him, and inside the cupboard Young-jun is squirming listening to everything. Despite everything he's heard, when the vice president is released from the closet, he says that he can't get angry with his girlfriend because she's so beautiful. The next day, Secretary Kim is doing her job, when she receives a message that makes her nervous. Sung-yeon goes to meet her later, so that they can talk and he can apologize for having made a statement without the woman's openness. Before answering him, Miso shows the message to her boyfriend who says that she should meet him and that he trusts her, so Secretary Kim says that she'll put an end to this situation with Sung-yeon anyway. We then see the two of them meeting. The man doesn't take too kindly to Miso putting an end to their relationship, even more so after finding out that it has to do with Young-jun, so Sung-yeon starts to get worked up. However, the vice president suddenly appears on the scene, having predicted that his brother would act like this, and tells him not to chase after Secretary Kim or bother her anymore. The man says that if he sees him talking nonsense in front of the woman one more time, he won't let it go, even if she is one of his family. In the next scene we see that Young-jun has taken his lover for a drive, so that they can cool off, and the man ends up taking a piece of clothing from the car so that she can warm up. Miso ends up commenting that the color is very beautiful, so the vice president decides to tell her that since he was a little boy, he has received pieces made especially for him from a designer friend of his mother. At this point, Secretary Kim adds one more thing to her list of why she believes the man is the boy from her childhood. The two of them get into the car for a while so that Young-jun can rest. Since he was yawning and his thoughts were racing, Miso decides to test something and calls him by the name she used to call the little boy, since she recently remembered it in one of her dreams, and it's Song Hyan Appa. As soon as Secretary Kim says it, the man answers the call and she gets the confirmation she was hoping for. Soon Miso is bombarding Young-jun with questions, whether his name has been changed, why he answered her call, but he just says that he heard her voice and answered, as usual. Afterwards, Young-jun takes his beloved home, and when he's at his residence, he reflects on what has just happened, coming to the conclusion that Secretary Kim doesn't need to know about something. The next day, Miso goes to the vice president's mother's house and decides to ask the lady if Young-jun changed his name at some point. She mentions that she heard the woman use a name that didn't belong to either of her 2 sons to refer to the boy who was captured. However, Madame Choi says that she must have heard wrong and that the boy who suffered at the hands of that woman was Sung-yeon, not Young-jun. The lady then asks her secretary Kim to leave, as she's very tired, and as she's leaving, Miso runs into Sung-yeon, who asks her to wait a while, as he's going to get the woman's childhood diary that she had lent him. Unfortunately, the man says he can't remember anything new from those terrible days, and while he's waiting, Secretary Kim recognizes the face of the boy who protected her in a photograph on the dresser, and when she asks Sung-yeon as soon as he returns, the man replies that this is his brother, Young-jun. After work, Miso has arranged to meet Young-jun at his house to go over some documents, and the woman starts to get emotional while she's preparing tea for them, because the whole situation, apart from being confusing, is very stressful, not knowing what really happened, or who was with her. But the woman has to hold back the tears afterwards, because her phone starts ringing and it's her sisters. She doesn't want to worry them. Of course, when the two discover that their secretary Kim is at the vice president's house until this time of night, they start bad-mouthing him, but this time Miso scolds them and Young-jun only hears that part, so the man understands that his beloved is very upset that his sisters don't accept him and will see if there's any way to change that. When they finish work for the day, the vice president takes his secretary Kim to her house, and unfortunately they won't see each other the next day, as the woman is going on her birthday trip with her family. Afterwards, the man goes to meet President Park, who ends up venting about seeing his ex-wife with another man. Yoo-sik says that he has done everything for this woman, saying that he has even followed a saying that if a woman is beautiful, she should conquer her family. The man fulfilled all the wishes of his in-laws and her relatives, but nothing was enough. Young-jun paid close attention to this part, and the insecurity of their relationship ending because Miso's sisters didn't accept him began to creep in. The next day, the head office staff gathered at Ga's new house to celebrate her move, but the landlady suggested they go to the rooftop so they could have more fun. Ga tried to refuse, but her colleagues wanted to go up. On the spot, the woman warned Gwi-nam that the company staff were there, and as there was nowhere to hide in time, the man went under the table. Although the hiding place worked for a while, when the group went to move the table, they found Gwi-nam, and the man made an excuse, saying that he was going to surprise them. So everyone invites him to join them, but as they've run out of food and drink, Sara offers to go to the market to buy more. There, Yang ends up helping the woman with the shopping, and Sara already liked him a little before, now this feeling is growing more and more. Meanwhile, the vice president has decided to surprise Miso by showing up on her trip with his sisters. He explains to his wife that he's going to do his utmost to make them change their minds about him, and it's at this point that they discover that the two of them are together as a couple. Young-jun really makes an effort. He eats at a small restaurant, gets muscles with the three of them, and ends up softening the hearts of Kim's secretary sisters a little, even more so after they realize how much the man likes the youngest. As they clean and prepare the food, the eldest tells them why they go on this trip every year, which is the fruit of a promise she made to her mother. When they were little and Miso was only 4 years old, the girl's father borrowed a neighbor's car to take the family to a contest he was going to take part in as a musician. However, on the way they passed a beach, and as there was plenty of time, the man decided to take a break so that his daughters could play in the sand. After a lot of fun, when it was time to continue on the road, the man realized that unfortunately he had lost his car key, and even after searching a lot, they still hadn't found it. In this situation, it's common for the woman or the man to get upset and end up arguing, but that's not what happened. The girl's mother said that she would look after them so that he could search better without interruptions, but the man denied this and replied that he would enjoy it with his family. Of course, he was upset that he didn't even have the chance to get the prize, as the aim was to give it to his wife, as it was her birthday. But thanks to the loss of the key, the family created a tradition of going to this beach every year and picking up mussels. They managed to do it until the following year with the whole family. Unfortunately, not long afterwards, the girl's mother fell ill and lost her life. So the eldest had to mature and take on the role of mother to her younger sisters, while never failing to keep her promise to continue the annual tradition. Returning to the office group, they ended up going to a bar after Sara returned with Yang, and there, after drinking a lot, the woman ended up revealing her feelings when they were alone. Meanwhile, Miso and Young-jun went for a walk, just the two of them, the man telling his beloved that if he'd known it was her mother's birthday, he wouldn't have disturbed her moment with her family, but Secretary Kim replied that it's okay, as she's realized how much he likes her and her sisters too. Miso tells us about the time her mother was ill in hospital, when she was jealous of her friends in the playground because they were always playing with their mothers. Then one day, her mother came home and tried hard to do her little girl's bidding, even though she was in a lot of pain. Being small, Miso had no idea that she was only discharged because there was nothing else to do and the doctors let her spend the rest of her time with her family. Secretary Kim is extremely grateful to her mother, because if she hadn't made the effort, she suddenly wouldn't remember her anymore, because she was so young and didn't have many memories with her mother. The vice president hugs his beloved and she promises that she will be by his side when the man is ready to tell her about his painful memory. The next day, the two of them have to leave Miso's sisters to go to a work presentation. And something is happening to Sung-yeon that leads him to the place where the secretary Kim is. The man's mother has revealed to him that the memories he has of his kidnapping when he was little are not true, because it was with young June. So Sung-yeon seeks out Miso to find out if this is true, while he begins the performance. And the fact that the man is bringing up the subject of the kidnapping, along with the red heels the woman is wearing on stage, triggers Secretary Kim's memories of what happened. Now she remembers everything, but then ends up fainting. In the next scene we see how Miso ended up in the woman's hands. One night the girl woke up looking for her mother, who was in hospital. When she went out into the courtyard, she thought she had seen her mother in the street, so she went out to call her and came across a woman. This woman tells Miso that she will take her to her mother, she just needs to spend a night at her house, and so the girl was taken to where young June was with his ankles and wrists tied by cable ties. Returning to the present, the vice president decides to tell the truth to his secretary Kim while she is unconscious. When they were both in that abandoned house, Miso asked him what it meant to die, as she had overheard her father commenting to someone that it could happen to her mother. The boy, who was only 9 years old, knew what it was, but didn't have the maturity to explain it to a 4-year-old, so he did the next best thing and told her that she wouldn't be able to see her mother if it happened. Young June, despite also being very small, was very mature in knowing how to help the girl calm down and try not to attract the attention of the woman who had caught them, so that they could both get out alive. But one night the woman was totally out of control. She woke young June up and told him that she had done everything for a certain man, that she had even taken out the baby that was in her belly, but he still didn't want her. So the woman decided that she should take the lives of the 3 of them, but changed her mind when young June said that she shouldn't cry over a man who doesn't even want her, and that's when the woman realized that she had gone too far. So she decided to take her own life and made the worst choice of all, because it was right in front of the children. Miso was still asleep and didn't end up seeing how it happened, but after she woke up, he crawled to the door and closed it so that the girl wouldn't understand that this was death and think that this was what was going to happen to her mother. The boy just told her that she couldn't go into that room and that the thing hanging there wasn't her aunt who had caught them, but a huge spider that was going to bite them, and that's how she developed arachnophobia. Young June, dragging himself along, managed to find a pair of scissors and free them, after which he took Miso to her house and asked her to promise never to go out alone again. The girl told him that the 2 of them should get married when she grew up and that she wanted to win a doll that her family couldn't afford to buy, as it was young June's father's company that made it, so he promised to give it to her when they met again. Then the boy kept walking, and because he was afraid the woman was after him, he started running, until he reached the police station and fainted. Soon afterwards, young June returned to his parents, and as the days went by, he asked to go back to that area because he wanted to see if Miso was alright, but when his mother took him there, it was already empty of residents and under construction to become an amusement park. After that, the man always wondered how Miso was, until the day he met her at a company meeting, and it was like being in a dream. Young June was relieved to realize that she didn't remember anything that had happened, not even him, so he decided to keep her close and keep the secret, so that the woman wouldn't go through the same nightmares as him. The man thought he would always have his secretary Kim by his side, and when she told him about resigning, he realized that she was the only one for him and he didn't want to lose her. Sung-yeon went to the hospital to check on Miso, and young June ended up fighting with his brother, blaming him for his beloved's fainting spell. His older brother ends up revealing that he knows that he wasn't the one who was kidnapped, and at that moment Sung-yeon also ends up realizing that all this time, the youngest has known the truth, the only one confused in the story was him. When the vice president goes back to his room, his secretary Kim is already awake and says she remembers everything that happened when they were in that house. She asks him why he lied for so long, and the man reveals that the reason was because he didn't want her to live with nightmares and fear like him. In the end, Young-jun promises that he will never hide things from his beloved again. Meanwhile, Sung-yeon is getting his true memories back and is now sure that everything that happened to his brother started because he left him alone in that place. The man at home starts freaking out, and when his mother goes to talk to him, Sung-yeon says that they should have told him that his memories were wrong all along, because the man spent years blaming Young-jun for something he didn't do, and besides, it was the youngest who went through the trauma, remembering it day after day. It was then that Madame Choi learned that her youngest son had not lost his memory, as she had thought. Returning to Secretary Kim, now that she knows the whole truth, her beloved can finally give her something he has kept for a long time, the doll she had asked him for, and Miso loved her present. The next day, Young-jun almost has to fight with his lover because she wants to go back to work, but he believes that his secretary Kim needs to rest one more day, so he doesn't let her leave the hospital and goes to her appointments. However, when he arrives at the company, he finds Miso at her desk and has to find another way to get her to rest that day. The way he found was to send everyone in the office for a day at the spa. In the next scene we see President Park, who is still suffering from his feelings for his ex-wife. He goes to lunch at her favorite restaurant on her birthday to see if he can bump into her, and it actually works. The man ends up discovering that the person he saw with her in the street was a cousin and is extremely happy, but the woman is annoyed by his attitude, because before she knew the truth, Yusik had accused her of having a new boyfriend and then getting married without telling her. Seo-jin tells him that he shouldn't even remember that today is his birthday and leaves angrily. Returning to Secretary Kim, the vice president dismissed everyone from work early and took her to the amusement park, where the couple had their first date. He wanted to show his beloved that he could build good memories on top of the bad ones, and ends up telling her that the place where they stayed is now the merry-go-round she loves so much. Miso tells Young-jun that now they're together, they can move on and be happy. Later, the man offers her to stay at his house, because he's afraid she won't feel comfortable on her own, as it took a while for him to feel himself. However, Secretary Kim says she will stay in her own home. After a while, when she's ready for bed, someone rings Miso's doorbell, and to her surprise, it's Young-jun with a suitcase. The man says he'll sleep at her place for a while, to make sure she's okay. The two even do a foot spa. But unfortunately nothing makes Secretary Kim relax with the man in her bed, so in the end, they decide to go to his house, which has 2 bedrooms. Miso goes to sleep in the guest room, but when she turns on the lights because she's scared, she's startled by Young-jun standing next to her bed. The man thinks his house is too big and doesn't feel safe with it, so he says he'll sleep with her. As they are again embarrassed by the situation, Secretary Kim suggests that he sing her a song to make her fall asleep, and it really works. But because of the position the woman was in, Young-jun didn't sleep all night and was uncomfortable enough not to wake her. At work, GA accidentally puts the summary he'd made of the meeting for the vice president in the shredder, and GWI Nam is the one who helps him recover it. Together, the two of them glue it together strip by strip until it's legible. At lunch, Miso has 2 questions for Young-jun, the first being why he changed his name when he was younger, and the second being why Sung-yeon was left with the memories of the kidnapping if it wasn't him. Since the vice president doesn't seem comfortable talking about it, Secretary Kim says it's okay for those questions to be answered another time. Meanwhile, in the office, Seara sends Yang a few hints that she wants to be proposed to, and later her answer comes. The man hands her a small bottle of soda, and as the woman takes the drink, a few words appear that in the end mean a proposal. When Miso and Young-jun return to the company, the man's parents are waiting for him in his office. The reason they are there is to find out if their son really hasn't lost his memory and has been hiding it all this time. The couple feel bad about everything they've put their youngest son through by not telling Sung-yeon the truth and apologize. Then we go back in time and see how Young-jun ended up in that place. His older brother convinced him to run away from the driver and go to where their father's company's amusement park was going to be built. However, Sung-yeon left him alone, claiming that he was going to buy some drinks for the two of them who were thirsty. As it took a while for his brother to return, Young-jun tried to go back, but ended up getting lost and on the way met that woman, who asked for his help and offered him a drink. When Young-jun returned to his family, Sung-yeon began to blame himself for what had happened to his brother, and this was so traumatic for him that the boy began to confuse his own identity. Sung-yeon became Young-jun, taking the memories of the kidnapping for himself, like his room and his clothes too. Sung-yeon became violent, wanting to blame Young-jun, as if the younger boy was the one who had left him in that place for the woman to pick him up, and so the two started fighting every day. One night, Young-jun overheard a conversation between his parents, where his father wanted to put his brother away and his mother replied that this made her want to take her own life. Hearing those words wasn't easy for Young-jun, as he had seen death up close and didn't want his mother to do the same as that woman, so he decided to fake a fainting spell and lie that he had forgotten everything that had happened, so that his brother could live with his new identity and his parents in peace. The couple thought it best to leave it at that, and so that Sung-yeon wouldn't suspect anything, they changed the younger brother's name to Young-jun. Madam Choi apologizes once again to her son and confesses that she has lived a life of regret and guilt because of the suffering she caused her youngest in order to protect her eldest. In the end, the three of them fall into tears and the secretary Kim gets emotional outside the room. Later, while on his way home with Miso, Young-jun decides to change course a little and goes to see Sung-yeon. The vice president ends up apologizing for having hidden the truth from his brother and says that although it's not easy having to put up with him, he'll make an effort not to see his parents sad and wants Sung-yeon to do the same. In the next scene, we see Young-jun and Miso drinking wine together. She says that the best thing is to always tell the truth, and the man asks if she wants to know how he feels now. As Secretary Kim says yes, he approaches her and starts kissing her, then the man starts opening the buttons of her blouse. And he says he doesn't want this night to go to waste. However, the two stop what they were about to do, because President Park keeps calling the vice president and thinking it's an emergency, the man decides to answer. Young-jun goes to his office, and it turns out that Yoo-sik has called to tell him that a company that competes with theirs is trying to take a client that they had just signed a contract with, so the vice president needs to study a way to convince them to stay, and the next day the two of them will go to France for a meeting with this group. Meanwhile, Secretary Kim continued to drink wine alone in the living room, waiting for her lover. So when Young-jun returns to the living room, he finds Miso asleep, and no matter how hard he tried to wake her, she was in a deep sleep, so the man decides to take his beloved to bed and let her rest. The next day, Secretary Kim helps the vice president pack his suitcase for his business trip, and they take a photo of each other to keep on their cell phones so that when they miss each other, they'll have them to look at. The two will be separated for a week, and during this time, Young-jun has been working non-stop in France so that he can get back to his beloved as soon as possible. What's new at the office is that Nam has been promoted to work with them, and the man works hard to please everyone, sometimes too hard. The vice president came back early and surprised Miso by showing up unannounced at the company, but the man ended up getting jealous when he saw Nam and his beloved laughing. So in order to satisfy his longing for his secretary Kim, the two of them take a break from work, and when they return, GA calls Miso to let her in on some gossip. An intern, who had recently been hired at the company, was passing an establishment and ended up seeing the vice president with a woman. She even took a photo and sent it to GA. At this point, Secretary Kim was already nervous, but when she saw the photo, she realized that her face hadn't appeared, so she calmed down. However, GA continues to look at the picture and notices that the bracelet Miso is wearing is the same one the woman is wearing in the photo, and zooms in to see Secretary Kim's face in the reflection. GA soon goes to talk to Miso, who asks her to keep it a secret. And after work, while on his way home, Young-jun ends up saying, "I love you," to his secretary Kim. In the next scene, we see GA and Nam. She has invited the man to have dinner together to celebrate his promotion, and Nam ends up drinking a little, which makes him tell his story. He lives with the basics and in a cramped place, because when he was little, despite being the smartest at everything, he was always known for being a poor boy. So Nam decided that he didn't want that for his children and decided to save as much money as possible, so that when he gets married and has his little ones, he can provide for his family without any worries. The man also says that on his birthday, he will buy Ga the same dinner, since she was the one who introduced him to the place and the delicious food. Returning to our main couple, Miso can't have her hot plans with Young Jun because she has to go to the hospital to be with her father. The man seems to have injured a ligament while performing with his band and will have to stay in hospital for a few days. The next day, we see Nam helping Ga with a report she was working on. The man decided to do this as a way of thanking her for the night before. And Miso's older sister is going to swap the shift of staying with their father with Secretary Kim, but first they have lunch together and the woman gives Miso some money she received from her dismissal from the old place where she worked, as she will now be going to a better one. The eldest also bought clothes for the youngest and explained that she is doing this because Miso was the one who took the most care of the family so that everyone could make their dreams come true, so it's time for her to return the favor. When she arrives at work, Secretary Kim receives an invitation from the vice president for them to leave the company and go to his house, to warm up their relationship, since they've been trying for a few days and there's always an obstacle. However, Miso's response is a little unexpected by the man. She says that he's been like a bulldozer these days, because he's always chasing her, non-stop. Young Jun was a little confused by this and decided to go to President Park to talk it over. Then his friend tells him that he shouldn't smother Miso, because it's her first time dating and if he's always pushing her, one day she'll get tired of it. So when the vice president meets his secretary Kim again, he apologizes for the way he's been acting and says he'll control himself more. But when he gets home in the evening, the man finds his beloved waiting for him in front of the house and she says she wants to be by his side until dawn, so Young Jun says he won't be able to hold back and the woman sees no problem with that. In the end, they both do it. The next day, the couple go to lunch at the restaurant that Young Jun's childhood friend is opening. And I confess that these scenes made me angry, along with Miso. The woman is a bit inconvenient, saying that she thought the vice president even had a crush on her, because he asked them to get married when they were 5 and also kept asking him to open those glass containers with the lid sealed, adding that it makes her want to kiss him. Her friend also talked about how handsome Young Jun looks. Of course, Miso was jealous, because this childhood friend of hers doesn't seem to be much of a kisser. I'm on the team of women who are close to Secretary Kim. Later, the vice president takes his beloved to the hospital so that she can visit her father and the man didn't intend to meet him that day, but Miso's father catches the two of them together at the reception and tells them to go up to the room to talk. While they're talking, Young Jun decides it's time to tell the man that he's in a relationship with his daughter and Miso's father says he's against it. However, then the vice president has to take a call and the man tells his secretary Kim that he's actually pretending to be against it so that Young Jun will dedicate himself to winning him over. In the next scene, we see that the gossip that Miso and the vice president are together has spread, as someone else has spotted the couple and now everyone in the company knows. So there's no shortage of rumors about the two of them over the next few days, and one even leads to a fight between the employees in the bathroom. GA and Sara overheard two women saying that Secretary Kim had seduced the vice president, among other absurd things. So the two from the main office decide to get into a fight to defend Miso, and the one who ends up breaking up the mess is Secretary Kim herself. The two don't regret defending Miso and she thanks them, but asks them not to spread the word, as she doesn't want Young Jun to get worried and take action that will make the others talk about them more and more. But the vice president finds out anyway, President Park telling him, and Young Jun's first reaction is to say that they don't deserve their salaries, but Yusik asks his friend to take Miso's feelings into consideration, as she was so upset by the whole situation that she tried to hide it from her lover. Then the vice president decides to invite his secretary Kim out for a walk, so she can relax. And the woman knows that her lover has planned this to cheer her up, so she says that she will continue to work hard, ignoring what others say, because when she started a relationship with the vice president, she knew that sooner or later, a situation like this would happen. The next day, other problems arise at the company, as a rival group seems to have copied a design for a collection of notebooks that Youngjoon's company will be launching next month. Now the head office team will have to work hard to find a solution to this situation. And it's clear that the proactivity and agility of Secretary Kim is the key to this solution, as the crisis, which could have taken days to resolve, was brought under control in less than 24 hours, thanks to the woman's organization of her teams and dedication to the company. This makes Youngjoon wonder if he will be able to find another person as competent as her, and at that moment, the woman decides to reveal what she wants to do, what her dream is. Miso wants to continue working at the company, because the adrenaline rush of solving these big problems and the feeling when they are solved is what makes her love this job. The woman ends up saying that she loves being at the vice president's side, and it's the first time she uses the three most expected words. Then the two of them go to Secretary Kim's house to have dinner together, and she says she's always dreamed of it, cooking for her husband while enjoying each other's company. And Youngjoon replies that he's going to make it real, because he wants to marry her and be her husband. Then the couple start kissing, when they are surprised by someone they didn't expect to be in the house. Miso's father gets up from her bed and says that he is against this marriage. Then young man says he needs to have a man-to-man talk with the vice president, and the two leave Secretary Kim's house, stopping only when they arrive at a bar a few minutes away. In short, their conversation revolves around Miso, and her father realizes how well Youngjoon knows his daughter. He gives his blessing for the man to propose to her, but young man's only demands are that he make his youngest very happy and propose in the right way, as she deserves. Since the conversation went well, the two continued drinking, and when they returned to Secretary Kim's house, she had to deal with the very drunk men. For her lover, Miso called her driver to pick him up, and before he arrived, Youngjoon declared himself to her, telling her how much he loves her from the moment he met her 9 years ago. The next day, Secretary Kim tells her colleagues in the office that she has decided to stay on, and everyone celebrates. Meanwhile, Youngjoon copes with his hangover and starts thinking of a way to propose to her, talking to his friend President Park and even looking on the internet, but he doesn't like any of the ideas. In the evening, Miso goes to dinner with Sara and Ga. The women have also had a few drinks and are very cheerful. Ji ends up getting things off her chest, as the two women had noticed that she was feeling a bit down. The woman tells them that she likes a man, but that at the moment he has revealed that he just wants to focus on his work and isn't thinking about dating. So Sara says that she has to win him over, be more proactive so that he is more interested in her than in her work. And during the drunkenness, when the Secretary Kim goes to the bathroom, the two answer her phone, which turns out to be Youngjoon calling to find out how his beloved was. The man's employees said that Miso was already very cheerful and that he should go and pick her up, but when the vice president arrives, the two take his wallet and watch, so that he doesn't take their friend away, and so the fun lasts a little longer. Later, when Youngjoon takes his beloved to her house, his secretary Kim declares herself to him on the way, which makes him very happy. The next day, Ga and Sara return the objects they took from him to the vice president, and the two are afraid of being fired, but Youngjoon knows how to differentiate between what is done inside and outside of work, which relieves them. But Ga doesn't have such a good day. She discovers that when she got home, she went to Gwinam and recorded a video on his cell phone saying that he should ask her to marry him. The man says he knows she was joking, but the woman thinks this is the best time to tell him she likes him, but the answer is not what she expected. Gwinam doesn't want to be open to relationships at the moment, as he wants to work towards his goal of saving a lot of money, and if he starts dating, he'll have to pamper his partner, and even if he doesn't do these things, the man doesn't want her to live in misery like him, so he thinks it's best not to get involved. In the next scene, we see Youngjoon talking to his mother. The news has spread that her youngest is dating Secretary Kim, so she has decided to call her son to her house to tell him some things that are worrying her. Madam Choi doesn't think it would be right for Young Jun to get involved with Miso, as his older brother has recently taken a liking to the woman, and she fears that this will make their relationship, which was improving, worse. Fortunately, Sung-yeon was listening to the conversation and shows up, saying that her brother shouldn't do that, because his secretary Kim had been by Young Jun's side for a long time and the feelings he had for the woman were fleeting, just because he thought the two of them had been through the trauma together. In this way, the relationship between the two is, for the first time after the accident, flowing in a healthy way, and Sung-yeon even helps him with the proposal, saying that if he focuses on what Miso would like to gain and what he wants to do for her, the answer will come. Then in the evening, Secretary Kim goes to the Vice President's house, and when she arrives, there is a path of candles, with 2 tables along it, one with a caramel candy that means a lot to both of them and the other with a notebook with words, just like the man had seen on the internet and said he thought it was childish. But it wasn't like that. The proposal was beautiful. As soon as Miso entered where she was told, Young Jun was playing on a piano and began to sing as soon as he saw his beloved, then he got down on one knee and proposed, which certainly received a yes in response. The marriage proposal soon spreads to everyone, and as the vice president's mother is very anxious, as it's her first child who's getting married, she decides to go out with Miso and give her a few things as presents. Secretary Kim even tried to deny it, as it was too much, but Madam Choi bought it anyway. The next day, there's a meal between the two families to decide on the date of the wedding, and although Madam Choi is doing it from the heart, Secretary Kim says she can't marry her and wants to give her a car, all the appliances, furniture and jewelry, because it would be too much and the woman doesn't think she deserves that much. Miso was even afraid when she said this, but Young Jun's parents understood that they were being too much and respected their daughter-in-law's decision. The rest of the dinner went perfectly well, and in a few weeks the couple will be husband and wife. Young Jun is excited about the wedding preparations and is upset that Miso is more focused on work than on the event. So one way of calming her lover's nerves was for her to take her wedding dress and show it to him at home. The piece is perfect and the groom is delighted. Meanwhile, earlier at work, President Park's secretary accidentally sent chocolates that were meant for another president to Yoo-sik's ex-wife, and in the evening he was rewarded for this oversight. The woman was at his house saying that today was the day he proposed to her in Paris, and the chocolate was the same as the one the man had given her that time, so she missed him and decided to find him. In this way, the two resumed their relationship. Now we see GA. She has bought the food that GWI Nam likes and has decided to take it to him to tell him a few things. Then the woman tells him that he should live more in the present and not worry obsessively about the future, that he can even put off liking someone, but he shouldn't do that with his self-love, whether it's stopping wearing old clothes or buying a nice meal every now and then. And then she leaves. The next day, Sarah and Yang decide to make their relationship public, so they go to the office and tell everyone, but their colleagues reveal that they already knew. In the evening, Miso gets emotional with her sisters about how much they wish their mother were alive to attend the wedding that will take place the next day, and the girl's father arrives with a surprise for them, as the man who never cuts his hair has decided to do it to look presentable at the wedding. Young Jun also went to have a moment with his family, and for the first time the brothers' relationship has been going well for a while. We've reached the wedding day and it's off to a good start for GA, as GWI Nam has decided to listen to her advice and is ready to start dating her and live a better life. Now let's move on to the ceremony, which is beautiful. The two look stunning, and seeing the memory of when they escaped from that terrible situation to what they're living today is wonderful. What did you think of this season? I hope you enjoyed the summary. Leave your suggestions in the comments and subscribe. If you liked the video, like it and share it to help me. Until next time.